Missed an episode of your favorite podcast? Choose from over a decade of content in our archives, not just the latest episode. All free at GCNlive.com.
This is your call to action. Get prepared, America. Economy, survival, energy, disasters. This is USAPrepares.com. Informative radio, educational radio. Interact now by emailing instructor@USAPrepares.com or text at 434-390-7953. Class, please take your seats. Now, your instructor, Vincent Finelli.
Everyone all set, cocked, locked. Here we go. Your dial set correctly to USA Prepares. Thank you for being in class with us today. Jason, thank you for engineering the broadcast at Genesis Communications Network. I'm Vincent Finelli. Rich Scheben's with us. Welcome, Rich.
Well, thank you, Vince. How are you doing this morning? No, I did not mention cars.
Rich, I'm frosted. I am absolutely, positively frosted. And I was telling Jason about this. And I know you want to talk about, what's happening. And this dovetails with that. We all know that President Donald Trump's Twitter account was shut down. We all know that. And we all think, oh, geez, that's terrible. Well, how would you feel if it happened to you? How would you feel if it was even more important than Twitter and it happened to you? Well, it happened to me this morning, and I almost was not able to broadcast, and I'll tell you why. The computers that I have in the studio that connect to Genesis Communications Network use Adobe Flash Player. Now, I don't want to use Adobe Flash Player, but the hardware that we use to connect between our studios, I'm talking about all the broadcasters at Genesis Communications Network, and Genesis Communications Network use Adobe Flash Player. It's required. I'm not a big fan of Adobe. PDF files don't work all the time, can't convert them, can't read them. It's a nuisance. Well, this morning, I clicked on an icon that I have, and it just fires up a little script, and off it goes and connects to my hardware, and within seconds, I'm connected to GCN. I click on it and I get a message from the faggots at Adobe. And they say, since Adobe will no longer be supporting Flash Player after December 31st, 2020, and Adobe will block Flash content from running in Adobe Flash Player beginning January 12th, 2021, Adobe strongly recommends that all users immediately uninstall Flash Player to help protect their systems, end quote. Adobe shut me down. Just like Twitter shut down President Donald Trump. Now, I have a feeling that other broadcasters who are dependent on Adobe Flash Player, and they are probably all over the world, are going to wake up this morning and find out their system doesn't work. Now, if they have some technical capabilities, they may be able to do a workaround. That's what I did. It took me a little while to figure out exactly what was going on and to figure out a workaround. And I did. And I'm not going to tell you how, because I don't want those faggots at Adobe knowing how I did it. But here in censorship 2021, this is the kind of thing that's going on. Broadcasters have been told by Cumulus Network, of which there are hundreds of radio stations, that they will not talk about the election fraud and the stolen election. If they do, they will be terminated. Well, what does that mean to USA Prepares? Well, if we decide to talk about it, and any of our affiliates, now what are affiliates? Those would be radio stations that pick up the feed from GCN. Those affiliates might be shut down. Can you imagine that? Free speech in America is almost gone. Almost. I'm telling you firsthand experience. So what does USA Prepares do? What we do, class, is we see it, we learn about it, we analyze it, we dissect it, and then we tell you about it. We tell you what happened, who did it, why we believe they did it. If we aren't sure, we'll tell you why we believe. If we are sure, we'll tell you why they did it, and we'll tell you what to do about it. Now, in this case, I could tell you exactly how I worked around it. But if I do, they might fix it so USA Prepares is off the air by tomorrow morning. So I've decided not to tell you how I worked around it. Now, how did I figure it out? Well, back in the 1990s, I used to be a computer consultant. I owned a computer manufacturing company. People came to our company for solutions. And I was the guy. I was the guy who studied it. I was the guy who learned it. I was the guy who built the computer networks and systems. I built microwave systems. I built wired systems. And I learned how the operating systems work. And they used to be pretty good, and they used to be pretty dependable until we had these big tech giants decide that they could run the world. They have conned us into wireless. They have conned us into electronic banking, electronic transactions, electronic everything. And they can pull the plug any second like those faggots did to me this morning. If you're thinking about getting rid of your landline, think again. Because there's a guy who went to Washington, D.C. I can't believe he went. Well-known broadcaster. Went to Washington. Felt he had to do it. Why? I don't know. People asked me if I was going. I said, never occurred to me. Why would I spend hard-earned money to go there on a junket? Why? I would never do that. And I didn't. Well, this guy did. And then he wondered why his cell phone didn't work. Why didn't his cell phone work? I'll tell you why. Because the people who are running the show in this criminal enterprise, this city-state known as Washington, D.C., or Deceit, set up stingrays. We've been talking about stingrays for years. They are suitcase cell phone lookalikes. They extend the antenna from this little suitcase-type device. They power it up, and it has a strong transmission. And cell phones go, oh, that's the nearest one. That's the tower. That's the one I want. Well, this thing is not a cell phone tower. It just appears to be like one. And it grabs MAC addresses, the machine addresses from each cell phone. It picks them up. So then it collects them, and it knows who's there. Everyone who had a cell phone, who was demonstrating and protesting in Washington, D.C., they knew who you were and where you were and when. They knew who was in the building. They knew who was outside. And there is a massive man and woman hunt right now looking for you. You had to be an idiot to go to Washington, D.C. And there's a whole network of people begging for your money. They beg and beg, and it's not GCN. It's not Genesis Communications Network. It's not us. But these guys beg and beg and beg. And what do? They send a guy to Washington, D.C. with your hard-earned money that they beg for. It makes me sick to my stomach. We've been taken over. And we've allowed it. Not me, but others have allowed it. You carry your personal tracking devices. What's the matter with you? Rich, that's pretty much all I want to say, but I'm annoyed that Adobe is shutting down communications. And it's a big deal. It's a real big deal. Because now broadcasters are going to have to phone in. And the quality of the audio is going to go down, and listeners are going to tune out. Rich, back to you.
Well, thanks, but I didn't even start yet. Well, I've got a lot of information, folks.
I heard you. Well, you mentioned cars. I heard that.
That's right. You always do that. Before, folks, I go into updated news and information and talk about what happened at the Capitol, which Vince just referred to. I want to mention a couple things about the Italy general affidavit. We all know about that. I mentioned that on Thursday about that Arturo D'Elia regarding the IT department of Leonardo and the satellite, basically switching votes from Donald Trump to Biden. Everything we hear, folks, at our level is speculation. We don't have the inside information. So just like what happened, like Vince was talking about at the Capitol, the propaganda, the set up false flag, which we all know was done through Antifa and BLM, and I'm going to prove that with some articles today too. The lies, the gaslightings, they can do anything with technology today. I want to warn everybody that they can change your audio. They've done this to me for years regarding what I say at a talk or a radio show. They can take what you say out of context with one word. They know who you email, who you text, who you call, and they can literally make your friends, your relatives, hate you in a matter of weeks because they put out false information. That's what they do. That's because they want to get you kind of standing by yourself. They can even, this is 20-year-old technology, they can change facial expressions when you're live on camera in like 1/10 of a second. So, we basically, what we're seeing is no loyalty to the president, to the Constitution, to the rule of law, and to the people of this country. And everybody knows this election was stolen. Everybody. It really has been an assisted coup, and our military needs to look themselves in the mirror and see if they have the courage, the honor, and still believe in their oath to uphold the Constitution. Because the land of the free and the home of the brave is going to turn into just a song. And that's it. So, whether President Trump enacts the executive order, I read he did. I've only read it in two different places. If he enacts the Insurrection Act, it's basically going to be, and this is to the military, do you arrest the criminals behind all this election fraud, purging of free speech, like Vince was just saying, or do you arrest we the people? The polls say 55% of the people say the election was stolen. It's really more like 80% because people are afraid to get on the list. So we really have to start thinking, is the Constitution being upheld? Because when you take away free speech, when you take away the ability for someone to protect themselves, you take away the Bill of Rights and the Constitution. That is not. But going back to the Italian story, there's an article here, Italian government's on the verge of collapse due to COVID. Well, I'm getting more information. It's due to the fact that there's information the Pope could be a pedophile. I don't know if that's true. I'm just telling you what I'm reading. And they don't want it to destroy Catholicism, so who knows if any of these further articles will come out. We'll be right back.
Overwhelming debt.
Rich, yesterday during the broadcast, Dr. Norm Shuley asked if we would be talking about the Insurrection Act, and he was talking about of 1807. Will you be covering that today? I mentioned it. I thought you would be.
Well, I covered it in a lot of detail, hours worth, including the executive order of 2018. But basically, I'll be real quick because I have so much information I want to discuss that's up-to-date news. Basically, the Insurrection Act of 1887, which I read there was up to 97% support, people leaving the voting booths to activate this, is basically when the president and the people consider that we don't have lawful or that unlawful obstructions, combinations, or assemblies or rebellions against the authority of the U.S. make it impossible to enforce the laws of the U.S. And we've seen a lot of examples that I've given regarding our courts, our lawyers, our judges have basically, the state legislatures have basically been eliminated from there's so much fraud on our Constitution because the state legislatures were supposed to be in charge. They were illegally cast aside by the establishment. The state Supreme Court, the governors, the AGs, the Secretary of States, the dog catchers aren't supposed to change the laws, the rules, right before the election. The Constitution says it's the state legislature. So we have so much unconstitutional activity. And so when these laws can't be enforced in any state by the ordinary course of judicial proceedings, that's when the military and civilians together can enforce the laws to suppress these illegal rebellions. It's not martial law. It's not the Constitution being suspended. It's using troops to enforce existing laws. So the military would collect evidence like the ballots and the servers and the envelopes and prove to the people with forensic audits that what was lawfully received that is legal votes. See, that's the problem. They did not, the powers that be on the left did not allow the forensic checking of Dominion machines, of ballots, etc., when we have so much proof of election and voter fraud. And, President Donald Trump just declared an emergency declaration. Keep in mind, we're still under, since like March, an emergency situation because of this COVID thing. So the president actually has a lot more powers than the left says he does. The big question is our military, do they have enough people who aren't cowards and traitors? And this sounds harsh, but if you've listened to me in over 10 years, for those of you in the military, you know that I've put you on a pedestal. You know that I always talk about how we have over 1 million combat soldiers who died for our country. I've talked about how your votes were legally taken away and switched to Joe Biden. I've mentioned hundreds of these articles because there's over 1,000 pieces of evidence of election fraud. So when I say what I said about the military, it's not meant to be derogatory. It's meant to look ourselves in the mirror and say, hey, we have so much crimes against our Constitution. Are you going to do anything? Are you going to support our president and our Constitution and our rule of law? That's my question. It's just a question. So Donald Trump did create on January 11th, another emergency declaration regarding, basically bringing more troops in and it authorizes basically the Department of Homeland Security and federal emergency agencies like FEMA to mobilize. And I don't know what the specifics are behind it. I don't know if things are looking good, if things are looking bad. I'm leaning towards things are looking bad because when we don't have the Constitution, when we don't have freedom of speech, when we don't have the Bill of Rights anymore, there's absolutely nothing good that can come of it. So what I like to do, folks, is I got a lot of information on up-to-date articles and stuff I want to discuss with comments, regarding what Vince was talking about, the so-called Capitol riot. I want to put everything in perspective, and I hear the music coming, so I'm probably just going to start after the break. But we have to remember there's a lot of people who have talked about violence against the people. Celebrities, politicians, all on the left, and I'm going to disclose some of that information when we get.
Rich Scheben's with us today, and for those of you who might be thinking, oh, well, Adobe isn't going to, the Flash player won't affect me. Well, guess what the call screen runs on? The call screens that, let's say Rush Limbaugh and all the other broadcasters that have studios in their homes. And they don't want you to know that, but they do. Guess what their call screens work on, just like mine right here at USA Prepares. Adobe Flash Player. Rich Scheben, back to you.
Thank you, Vince. Now, folks, just a little disclaimer here. When I give these articles, they're all, again, published articles in the public domain. And, a lot of this some of this could be CIA propaganda, false flags, in order to manufacture the perception. It's just like what I said about the Italy situation. When certain things come out, they change the headline to give themselves some plausible deniability. And just like what they said during the break about how America has the rule of law, no, we don't. We're not even close to the rule of law. Because if we had the rule of law, the military would have stopped all these coups from happening already, many times. The Russia. There's information from a WikiLeaks drop involving George Soros, John Podesta, and Donna Brazil regarding fixing voting machines in March of 2016. And, quote, they have the machines humming by November. See, everything that the Democrats or the propagandists or the elite do is unconstitutional. And because it's unconstitutional, they should have been arrested. Everything's rigged. Everything's fixed. Donna Brazil, remember, she rigged and fixed and handed Hillary Clinton debate questions. If you or I did that, people, we'd be in the who's gal for the rest of our lives. See, we have no regulations. The rule of law is gone. National security is literally hanging by a thread. Where are these antitrust laws that big tech are doing? It's a joke. Suing is a joke. Everybody is either bought and paid for or blackmailed. It's unbelievable. We have no value in judges, in lawyers, in courts. It's, when they talk about the so-called attack and breach on the Capitol, this is a joke. It's been proven, and I have articles, and I want to mention these today, that Antifa and BLM really started all this. Look what the left has done. They've taken over cities, created autonomous zones, they've killed cops, destroyed statues, they attacked the Kavanaugh hearing, remember that? It's been going on for 7 to 8 months, murders through the roof, rape is through the roof, but they're not reporting that because it depends on what group is doing the raping. They're burning buildings, destroying businesses, covering up crimes, manufacturing hate crimes. What if the Republicans did 1/100th of these fake hoax trials made up with Russia with your tax dollars? What if, the Bidens are doing the same thing in China and Ukraine that they said Trump was doing, and they spied on Trump, the fake Steele dossier, a stolen election that wasn't even close, with over thousands of pieces of evidence that I've given on this show? That says that freedom, liberty, and the rule of law should not be a right conservative issue. The Constitution should not be a right conservative issue. Fake elections, propaganda, media, truth, the treason of big tech, censoring, surveillance. This is what dictators do. People, it's a joke. Pelosi, Presley, Kamala Harris, Schumer, I've seen all the videos and audios with them inciting violence against Trump and the Republicans. The hypocrisy and double standards is over the top. It feels like we're living in Beijing, USA. Same thing with celebrities. Do you remember when Madonna said she was thinking about blowing up the White House? She said that right after she said, if you vote Democrat, I'll give everybody BJs. See, we can't have a separate set of rules, laws, and accountability based on what group you're in. No country can survive that. See, one of the left's primary strategy is accusing your opponent of what they're actually doing. This is why I've given hundreds of articles on hypocrisies and double standards. The same thing with big tech. Big tech needs to be split up, it needs to be nationalized, and it needs to be treated like a public utility. And when people say, well, I'm not a lawyer, I'm not a constitutional lawyer, it doesn't matter. There's no rule of law. When courts, including the highest court in the land, Supreme Court, is too afraid to hear evidence, and subpoenas are no longer honored, we don't have a rule of law, folks. You look at the so-called Antifa BLM riots, they lasted for like 7 to 8 months. This Capitol riot lasted for like a couple hours. and it was induced, and I'm going to prove it, and I have already, but I'm going to give more articles on that. And it was condemned. None of the BLM Antifa riots was condemned by Democrats, or if there was, very few. And 23 people were shot dead during that period of the Antifa BLM riots. The Capitol was one. 700 police officers were injured during the BLM Antifa riots. 14 injured. Now, I'm not saying, oh, wow, what a difference. Nobody should be injured. Not to mention the fact on the Antifa BLM riots, 150-plus federal buildings were damaged. Only one federal building was damaged at the so-called Capitol riot. And how about the hundreds and thousands of small businesses destroyed from Antifa and BLM? But there wasn't any businesses destroyed at the Capitol. But there's a nationwide outrage because Donald Trump incited it. There's so much evidence of endorsed violence committed by left-wing activists. I have a list here, and I'm only going to go through a few because I have so much information I don't have time. Well, Kamala Harris urged followers to cover rioters' bail. Chris Cuomo said, who said protests were supposed to be peaceful? I promise you, these are all public articles, published articles in the public domain. I'm not making this up. An MSNBC reporter described fiery scene as mostly a protest. Not making this up. CNN labels burning protest fiery but mostly peaceful. It's a joke. The Democrat National Convention refused to condemn all the riots. A Pulitzer Prize winning New York Times writer, destroying property isn't violence, quote unquote. Not making this stuff up. Government-funded PBS, that's right, your tax dollars goes. Reporter denied anarchists are anarchists. I don't even have a comment for that type of stupidity. CNN's Don Lemon compares leftist riot to Boston Tea Party. This is all archived, all of it, video and or audio. CNN's Chris Cillizza complained about the term riot. We've gone beyond 1984, stupid people. New York Times columnist finds Portland anarchists in piece titled, "Help Me Find Trump's Anarchists in Portland." Not making this up. Joy Reid said BLM riots are really just undercover white nationalists causing trouble. I mean, we're getting into the realm of comedy here. Huffington Post releases video outlining how riots built America. NBC News allegedly instructed staff to avoid term riot. Seattle mayor on anarchists taking control of downtown. Don't be afraid of democracy. Remember one of those officials was saying it was a summer of love. Washington governor unaware of Seattle occupation. Remember the autonomous zone? Pelosi, when mobs tore down statues, people will do what they do. GQ magazine, violent protesters work. Riots are a proportionate response. From the Slate, Mother Jones, riots aren't irrational. Time magazine, the term riot is loaded. I can go on and on and on, but I don't have the time. So I'm going to go to more of this topic regarding articles that are, again, published in the public domain. And Vince, I appreciate you allowing me to exercise my First Amendment right. All right, next article. And there's a video. Capitol Police removed barriers allowing protesters to walk into the Capitol. Next, another video surfaced of Capitol Police leading protesters in Washington into the Capitol. Is a light coming on, folks? Are you connecting these dots? Next, why was founder of far-left BLM group filming inside the Capitol as the police shot the protester? People, we have all the evidence of all this, the information, the articles, how this was set up, how they're calling people into literally, and I'm looking for this article. I have it here. Here it is. Basically, it's titled Antifa Comrades. Come to the Trump, blend in with the Trump supporters, come in on the 6th, wear your MAGA hats and blend in. This was all 100% planned. Okay, next. Why was founder of left BLM group inside Capitol? Okay, I think I just discussed that. Breaking. Law enforcement confirms Antifa posed as patriots and stormed the Capitol. And this is what this is really sad. Trump supporters attempt to stop Antifa from destroying the Capitol building. This was on video, but the mainstream media does not mention that. There's no representation for the people. Next, first extremist in Capitol building siege is identified as BLM Antifa activist. Quote, we're gonna effing rip Trump right out of that house. Next, bizarre video shows police officer directing lethargic leader of small mob dressed all in black to the Senate chambers. Come on, people. Can't we connect the dots and figure this out? Next, flashbangs were going off as the U.S. Capitol before Trump finished his speech. Antifa organized the protests so the Capitol can be stormed before Trump was even done talking. This was all planned, every bit of it, folks. All right. But you have to remember, people, there's evidence upon evidence, and before I go into the next article, I'm going to wait till after the break. There's so much evidence here, people, that shows this was planned. And the comparison to the damage done by Antifa and BLM is not even worth discussing. It's so different. I'll be right back.
Scheben with us, Rich. Please continue.
Oh, thank you, Vince. Okay, next article. There's a new video of weapons that shows that Antifa was handing out weapons from a bag during the storming of a Capitol. It's on video. Next, Gab CEO blames CIA and Mockingbird Media for latest PSYOP campaign of slew of new accounts popping out of nowhere and making threats and violent threats. You got to remember, a lot of this, people, is a PSYOP. They go for your ego. They go for your pride. They stage things. They plan things. They create false flags. It's just like when there's a shooting or a police shooting. Do you ever sit back and wait before propaganda comes to the mainstream media? Was that person risking arrest? Was that person dangerous? Did that person have priors? Was that person on drugs? You have to wait for the information, because this is what the mainstream media and the powers that be do. They want to get you not thinking. They want your emotions to get so high that you turn into a crowd follower. And this is why a lot of these state capitol supposed armed protests, there's a lot of people who think that there's a plot behind this, and it's done to basically set you up with a false flag to take away our Second Amendment rights, which again is unconstitutional. And I cannot believe there's been so much unconstitutional things going on in this country, not to mention the last 4 years against Donald Trump. I mean, if any of you had to go through a trial, spent hundreds of $millions saying that you are colluded with Russia or any of our enemies or were a spy, and it was proven not to be true, and there was a Steele P dossier that was proven to be bought and paid for by Hillary Clinton and the DNC. Fake trials, 4 years of potential coups. I want you to put yourself in those shoes. And all this crap about, it's the whites' fault. It's not a war on whites. It's a war on the poor and middle-class whites. And then you throw in males and heterosexuals, and if they got a Christian name, all that stuff, it's even worse. Because how many names have I given? The Bezos, the Gates, the Rockefellers, the Rothschilds. A lot of pale-skinned people who not only are not going to have their wealth confiscated, but these are the people who bought and paid for the narratives. These are the people, the George Soroses, who pays for the Antifas and the BLM. The money laundering that goes through our Congress in bills for money laundering purposes to pay people off. We have been unconstitutional for a long time, folks, but the last 4 years, and especially the last year, it's been exponential. And that's why I asked that question, where is the military? Did you give an oath to uphold the Constitution? I am asking. Little old me is asking. Next, these 150-plus multinational corporations have CEOs demanding that Biden be made president immediately. How many times have we talked about the delegitimization of work? How many times have we talked about fascism, where corrupt parts of the government is together with big corporations to eliminate small business, to create more wealth inequality, to eliminate the rule of law, to demand no protection rights or restitution for the people who are affected, which gives more runaway power and enables and protects the most corrupt companies, in this country and world. This is what happens when you give liability immunity. You destroy capitalism. You don't enforce fraud. You create illegitimacy and fascism everywhere. This is what happens when you don't put America first and you put yourself, your group, your hyphen, and your pronoun first. You eliminate the rule of law with precedence, and you give free lunch to the elite, and they give you back divide and conquer strategies. Next, new detailed inventory on election fraud in the 2020 election by D. Roy Murdoch proves strong evidence on President Trump's swing states overall race. Basically, what it means, and I have the chart in front of me, alleged vote irregularities, improprieties, and illegal ties by category and state for the 2020 election. Real quick, margin of victory, the loss for Joe Biden, Arizona, 15,000 plus. Georgia, 621,000 plus. Michigan, 95,000 plus. Nevada, 12,000 plus. Pennsylvania, 18,000 plus. And Wisconsin, 296,000 plus. This is the margin that Joe Biden lost as per this patriot who hasn't been bought and paid for. We'll be right back.
Rich, I'd like to put an exclamation point on what you have been saying for years. Not just today, but for years and years with me. Paul Joseph Goebbels was a German Nazi politician and Reich Minister of Propaganda of Nazi Germany from 1933 through 1945. That's 12 years. He was one of Adolf Hitler's closest and most devoted associates. Hold that thought. CumulusMedia.com. Their website says, Cumulus Media, where every voice matters. Where every voice matters. Hold that thought. TheTelegraph.com. Headline, Talk radio owner orders conservative hosts to temper election fraud rhetoric. Quote, after months of stoking anger about election fraud, one of America's largest talk radio companies has decided on an abrupt change of direction. Cumulus Media, which employs some of the most popular right-leaning talk radio hosts in the United States, has told its on-air personalities to stop suggesting that the election was stolen from President Donald Trump or else face termination. Or else face termination. There's a memo that's quoted in this article from thetelegraph.com. If you transgress this policy, you can expect to separate from the company immediately. End quote. Now, if you think that the voices of the people are not being suppressed, are not being controlled by a company that owns 416 owned and operated stations across 86 markets, that would be Cumulus Media, do you think that they are controlling the message? Do you think that there's any link to Paul Joseph Goebbels? Has he been reincarnated? Does he run Cumulus Media? Do you think there's a such thing as free speech in the United States of America? I'm here to tell you that I don't think so. Now, it is within the rights of Cumulus to tell its employees what they can talk about on their radio stations. They can fire them for it. So if you'd like to serve at the pleasure and get your paycheck from Cumulus, you'll have to do what they say. What I'm telling you is now you can, for sure, you now know that the message is being censored at the highest levels. Rich Scheben, back to you.
Well, thank you, Vince. You know what? It's against the law to censor free speech because it's in the Constitution. It's our First Amendment. Secondly, I'm not speaking for anybody, but I'm speaking to myself, for myself. I am loyal to President Trump and to our country and the Constitution. And I have given thousands of proof of voter and election fraud. And a lot of the propaganda that you mentioned, Vince, is often associated with they want certain group behaviors. Well, this article I just mentioned regarding this investigative journalist, DeRoy Murdoch, I'm sure he's not related to the Murdochs. I guess he could be. I don't think he's related to the Murdochs who own Fox News. Anyway, this man is a black man. This man is an American. This man is a patriot. He's an American before his group, hyphen, and pronoun. And he basically says that there's a lot of worrisome detail in his investigations. And, for example, almost 20,000 ballots in Arizona cast by those under the age of 18. In Georgia, over 20,000 out-of-state voters voted in the state. In Michigan, almost 28,000 ballots were requested by voters who didn't even make the request. This is Twilight Zone stuff, people. In Nevada, 42,000 plus suspected in state double voters. Absentee ballots officially recorded as returned on or before the day they were mailed out, totaling 58,000 plus in Pennsylvania. That can't happen, folks. You can't get stuff before the date it was mailed out. There's only one answer. It's called fraud, unless you have a time machine. Show me the time machine. And in Wisconsin, over 96,000 able-bodied voters skirted the Badger State's voter ID by claiming to be indefinitely confined. It was fraud after scam after fraud after scam. This man is a hero. This man is a patriot. This man is an American. So for those of you who know of investigative journalist DeRoy Murdoch, please thank him for our service of truth and not propaganda and not selling out to the criminal cabal. Okay. So I had to say that because of the propaganda that you talked about and how it's always associated with group. Next article. ABC and CNN both broadcasted the real theft of 32,400 votes from Senator Perdue going to Georgia runoff election broadcast. Well, they really think that Georgians are idiots. It's incredible. Next, FBI claims jurisdiction and yesterday took control of shredded ballots being analyzed in Georgia and then sends them back to the shredder. Our own FBI, who are being paid by you people, are throwing you under the bus. This is a sad time in America. Next, recognition specialist Jovan Pulitzer says over 300,000 Pennsylvania mail-in ballots never got processed by the United States Postal Service. And there's a video. Oh, but that video must be a conspiracy. What a joke. Over 1 million combat soldiers died for this country. And this is what our government workers are doing, being paid by the taxpayers, and you're doing this to us? You're disgusting. Next, special reports failed false flag. High-level military intel source says D.C. Capitol riot was meant to be much larger. That means that they had this planned. This was all the propaganda. Everything was designed, and there wasn't enough people for the show. Next, Democrats to censure Mo Brooks and Louis Gohmert in the coming days for challenging election fraud. What a joke. You can't even discuss anything. I mean, this is total, like Goebbels. We've gone full Nazi, America. Full Nazi. Next, dissent is not allowed. Twitter will no longer allow any questions of the fraudulent election. Next, America's richest 1% owned 5% in 1990. Today, they own 36%. How many times did I say it's not about equality, fairness, tolerance, and diversity? How many examples by the thousands that I gave, that we gave, to show that the wealth redistribution is going from the bottom 93% to the top 1% to 2%? How many? No, it's about equality, fairness, tolerance. No, it's not. You've been played, people. You've been duped. You've been conned. And did you hear about Trump and Pence held an Oval Office meeting, first meeting since Pence betrayed Trump and his supporters of the country? Interesting. Well, what I'm going to do now, folks, is I'm going to mention some COVID news, and then I want to have Vince participate because I've been used to being solo for a while, and I feel obligated to let Vince get some airtime here. So let me mention some COVID news over the next couple of segments, and then Vince, I want your comments on some of these things, your personal comments. Okay, regarding the agenda, the COVID. California's $1 billion mass contract unveils revolving doors with China. That's right, people. No, it's about equality, fairness. No, it's not. It's about your safety. No, it's not. Next, Portuguese nurse dies suddenly after receiving COVID vaccine. Next, rate of adverse reactions to COVID vaccines already 50% higher than the flu shot. Next, Norwegian nursing home patients dead after receiving first dose of Pfizer vaccine. Next, Cuomo goes for broke, threatens $100,000 fines on New York hospitals that don't use their COVID vaccines in 7 days. This is Nazi USSR and Mao all wrapped in one. Next, Miami doctor dies after receiving first dose of Pfizer vaccine. Next, Children's Hospital grapple with wave of mental illness. Remember when I interviewed Dr. Shealy, I specifically asked him, why are we seeing all these neurological disorders and autism? And I laid out a slew of prognosis. His answer was vaccines, 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 vaccines. It's on tape. You can listen to it. Next, virus expert claims coronavirus pandemic is the greatest hoax ever perpetrated on the world. Next, CDC studies severe allergic reactions to coronavirus vaccines happening at a higher rate than flu vaccines. Next, COVID-19 84. UK moles ban on leaving the house more than once per week. Again, this is time for my disclaimer. These are published articles in the public domain. Rich does not make this stuff up, I promise. Next, DTP vaccine from Bill Gates killed 10 times more African girls than the disease itself. 10 times. Next, 24 dead and 137 infected at nursing home after given the COVID vaccine. See, folks, when you live in a Twilight Zone episode, we're not going there. We're here. Let me just give you a few examples. Magazine paints Hunter Biden as struggling artist instead of DOJ investigated target and meth addict. Not making this up. Another Twilight Zone. California ruling allows rapist pedophiles to be released early from prison. Next, Sanctuary California freed illegal aliens and MS-13 gang members who murdered a woman in front of her daughter. Next, California forces insurance companies to pay for sex organ mutilation in gender-confused teens. You know, here's an article right here. Secretary of State says regarding censorship, it's time to put wokeism asleep. Well, Mike Pompeo, we're tired of the talk. We've seen the Constitution get destroyed, which is against the law, in front of our eyes. We've seen the cowardness of the Supreme Court, caring more about their own self-importance and self-preservation than the American people. We've seen up to 6 countries involved in election fraud. That's not only foreign interference against the executive order, but against our Constitution. We're tired of talk, Mike. Is there anybody there who's not a government worker on welfare, who actually does their freaking job? I'm going to mention a few more excerpts or articles regarding the surreal consequences of where we're at now. See, this is what happens when we go decades and decades and decades of inaction towards political correctness. Truth doesn't even matter. Next, NPR caught publishing Capitol siege, and that's in quotes, story hours before it took place. They published it hours before it took place. This was staged, people. Come on. How much evidence and facts do you need? Next, the left builds a 7-foot wall around the White House and deploys tens of thousands of National Guard troops to protect themselves from their own treason and election theft, but they never believed in walls and fences. What's going on? How could that be? Next, IRS sends payments to over 13 million bank accounts that are no longer open or valid. Is that like a little money laundering going on there, paying people off? What do you think that's about, folks? Next, you're going to love this one, Vince. Lincoln Project founder accused of offering jobs to young men in exchange for sex. Scott Stedman shared messages he received from the Lincoln Project co-founder John Weaver. Stedman says Weaver referred to him as my boy and told him how hot he was in private messages. Again, I'm not making this up. Ryan Gurdusky appeared to have set some of this in motion with several tweets earlier in the day, claiming he knew a founding member of the Lincoln Project who offered jobs to young men in exchange for sex. So I kind of backtracked this a little bit because there's people questioning regarding the comments in different areas on different. So I kind of backtracked it a little bit, and people are thinking the Lincoln Project is a front group for homosexual sex. And it got my attention initially because men were asking if Kellyanne Conway was available for dating if George was batting on the other team. So that's kind of some of the things I was finding in the comment section to backtrack to get this article. Hilarious. I mean, this is Saturday Night Live stuff, people, if it wasn't so sad and pathetic. Next, newly declassified 2016 emails of fired FBI Director James Comey reveal the Washington Post investigative reporter Shane Harris, formerly with the Wall Street Journal, was feeding Comey dirt on President-elect Trump through mutual friend Ben Witz of Lawfare Brookings Institute. We are so corrupt, so unconstitutional, and our powers that be who get paid by the taxpayers are sitting in their chair, not doing their job. It's like collecting a welfare payment. And going back to what I was talking about, how the powers that be think that Georgians, not just Georgians, but especially Georgians, all the swing states, including California, are idiots. Here's some information. In hundreds of cases in Georgia, the ACLU trained poll workers issued voter access cards to people who had already voted absentee, ignoring status message that appeared on their electronic poll pads showing they had applied for an absentee ballot. In addition to that, in a press conference, Georgia elections official Gabriel Sterling insisted allegations of fraud are unfounded and that Biden won the election fair and square, even though there was 125 plus investigations related to the election fraud still open. Still open, people. We are living the dream. Thanks, Vince. I'm going to end this in about 5 minutes. I want to get your opinion on all this. I mean, we've gone full Nazi. We've gone full. It's just a shame to see our country fall like this, where truth doesn't matter, the rule of law doesn't matter, the Constitution don't matter, judges and courts don't matter. It really is. It really is a sad time for America, where we don't even have our own military enforcing their oath to basically keep our Constitution going. You know, it just, I'm almost speechless. Okay, let me give some more evidence, some more math impossibilities, some more facts. All right, in Fulton County, 2 veteran poll supervisors were literally fired because they told the truth about voting irregularities, because they gave their word that they wanted to prevent fraud, deceit, or abuse. So when they came forward with that, they got fired. And keep in mind, remember, November of 2019, Brad Raffensperger of Georgia, when he was running for Secretary of State, he received a $2,500 contribution from the wife of the managing director of Dominion's subcontractor that provided the state's voter check and computers. And poll watchers say a group called Black Voters Matter was actually coaching elderly, filling out their absentee ballots, handing them out gifts, especially to indigent blacks in Fulton County, and rural county, and clearing arrest warrants and restoring suspended licenses for votes. This is all proven. This is hard to believe it's America, isn't it, people? Next, 4 Democrats charged with vote harvesting scheme in Texas, in which they fraudulently solicited mail-in ballots from able-bodied voters by claiming they were disabled. See, this isn't in these, 6, 7 swing states, folks. This has happened. This was stolen in California, stolen in New Mexico, stolen in Minnesota, stolen in Virginia, most likely the way it looks. And keep in mind the report from the investigative journalist Murdoch I mentioned earlier in the show. Next, in 1983, Susan Rosenberg planted a bomb outside the U.S. Senate to create assassinations for the Republican senators. Well, guess what? Jerry Nadler got President Clinton to pardon Susan Rosenberg. Guess where she's working now, folks? She's a board member of Black Lives Matter Network. Yep, I'm not making that up. Nancy Pelosi says it was an epiphany for the world to see that there are people in our country led by the president who have chosen their whiteness over democracy. So according to the speaker, whites are now unpatriotic because they're white. And how many times, Vince, have you heard me say people should be judged by patriotism, intelligence, courage? That should be the new PIC acronym. Hard work, effort, proven results, qualifications, willingness to help others. How many times have you heard me say that criteria? And we should not be judged by our group, our hyphen, our pronoun. I'm blue in the face. I'm out of breath saying it. 2 members of the U.S. Capitol Police have been suspended after welcoming, it's not my word, pro-Trump rioters into the Capitol building during the insurrection. A third individual was also arrested, but it was unclear if it was police or National Guard. So people, if you can't tell that this was staged, then you got an IQ of about 20. You're in a coma. I'm sorry. It's so obvious how they use propaganda and poison us against ourselves. We have to remember, it's not white, it's not black, it's not whatever you are. Every narrative starts from the top down, and they pay people off or blackmail them to manufacture the perception of that narrative as it goes down the hill. And we have proved that time and time again. Vince, I would like, and I apologize for taking so much airtime. I've shortcutted my shortcuts. There's things I'm not going to say because I don't have time, but I really feel that since you're on the air with me, and you haven't been in a while, because you've allowed me to bring forth a lot of this evidence, and I appreciate it. What's your opinion of everything that I've said today, I've said in the past? Where do you think we're going? Do you think we have a chance? Do you think our military will actually honor their oath and support the Constitution? Do you think Secretary of State Mike Pompeo is just going to say it's time to put an end to wokeism, or are we going to actually have our people at the top who are paid by us actually do their job? Vince.
Well, let me answer that in several different ways. One of the things that you mentioned was COVID-19. From day one, probably around January of last year, 2020, I have had an immutable position on COVID-19, that it's deadly, it's dangerous, it spreads, it kills people, it's costly, and it was man-made. And it was either man-made by the Chi-Coms, or man-made by the United States, or man-made by both. And that's what I said. And what you have said over many broadcasts is it was made by the Chi-Coms in a lab with assistance from the United States, meaning GSK, GlaxoSmithKline, and other individual investors who have poured money into the development of biological weapons that are against the Geneva Convention. So, that being said, those individuals, the entire board of directors, and the top management of everyone involved in this global Kevorkian suicide should be drawn and quartered. Well, let's make it a little more pleasant, a little less messy. We'll just have public gallows and hang them all. Those are my thoughts on COVID-19. And why do I say that? Because the Finelli family has not gotten it. However, our neighbors have. Husband and wives have gotten it. Farm right next to us. Both husband and wife. Down for a month. Now, some people say, oh, it's no big deal. And by the way, these people are older. Some people might say, well, who needs them anyway? Well, I'm saying, really? Just bring about their demise faster? Across the road, husband and wife, older, farmers. They both got it. Down for a month. So, do I still think it's real? Absolutely. Have I changed my opinion? Absolutely not. Let's move to free speech. Cumulus. Cumulus, with the Joseph Goebbels MO. Letting their broadcasters know that their employment is contingent upon them towing the line and not saying certain things. So free speech has been stifled, stomped on, limited, curtailed, and censored at Cumulus Media and all of their outlets. Have I been censored? Absolutely. There's a guy who used to be a friend of mine. No longer would I call this individual a friend. He's been to our house. We've invited him for Christmas and other holidays. Never again. Never again. So this guy threw USA Prepares off the air without warning, just threw us off the air and went on the air, and he and his cohort decided that they would explain why. And several reasons. One, they could sell programming. And by throwing USA Prepares off the air, they could free up a time slot, move another guy into our position who wanted our time, another former friend who's been to the house, no longer a friend. So he wanted the time slot. There was money available by someone who wanted to pay for programming. So if you think that alternative media does not sell airtime, you're mistaken. So these guys, and I'm not talking about Genesis Communications Network. I'm not talking about us here at GCN. I'm talking about another network. These guys beg for money. I used to be on the network, and the boss would call me and say, hey, Vinny, I need to beg for money. He didn't use those words, but, we need donations. What do they need donations for? You might want to ask that. You might want to ask the question, why do these broadcasters beg for money? And what do they do with the money? Does it go into the network, meaning broadcasting? Does it go into the gas tank? Does it go onto the table? Does it go into restaurants? Does it go into travel? What does it go for? I don't donate to anything. However, I do help people directly. I do not put money into a black hole where I don't know where every cent is going. I'll never do that again. Never. Why was USA Prepares removed from that radio network? Because Vincent Finelli absolutely, positively refused to say that COVID-19 was fraud, fake, a hoax, and BS. Because I still don't believe it is. I believe it's real. I believe people are dying. I've talked to medical doctors. I've talked to nurses. I've talked to practitioners. I was involved at the highest level of a hospital meeting. They didn't know I was there. I was there. I was doing investigative reporting. When Vincent Finelli says to you, I know, it's not I think like other broadcasters. When I say I know, I know. I was there. I heard the highest level of the hospital. I'm talking about the big guns. I am talking about the chairmen and women of departments. I heard them speak and say it's real, and it's terrifying. I've talked to the doctors who are in the COVID ward. They're terrified to be there. It's real. So I was thrown off the air because I refused to capitulate. I refused to say, well, maybe it's fake. It's not a fake, Robert, in Kansas. It's real. So I was thrown off along with the rest of USA Prepares from that network. And we'll never go back. Those guys have fired me 4 times. I'm a slow learner. but I got it now. I will never help them. They are never going to set foot on our property. Never. We come back, I have a couple other pieces. And we were talking about, I never said I liked homos. I don't like homos. They're perverted. When we come back, I'll tell you. I've never said that we are a free speech forum. If we were a free speech forum, I would allow profanity. If we were a free speech forum, I would allow pro-homosexuality discussions. You know, the joys of being a homo. I won't allow it. So I've never said that we are free speech. In fact, I'm saying that we are not free speech. We are a broadcast classroom whose mission is to teach people actionable things. And we're not going to teach people about how to be a homo because it's perverted. We will teach people how they can save money, how they can do things better, how they can live a better life, how they can be good stewards of the planet. Be glad to do that, and we do. And what we talk about must be true. We must broadcast with honesty and integrity. Now, another network, the one that fired me and the rest of USA Prepares, feels that they are of free speech, but they're not, because they got rid of USA Prepares because of me, because of my stance on COVID-19 being a pandemic. It's taken the world down. There's no question about it. Is it being used? Yes. Is it being manipulated? Yes. Is it a reason for lockdowns and the destruction of economies? Absolutely. And I said that on day one, that I believe any and all of these conspiracy theories about COVID-19. I believe them. But at the same time, I believe you can die from it. And would I get in a car with someone who I didn't know? Absolutely not. Would I ride share? No, I wouldn't. Do I think that promoting ride sharing, going to Washington, D.C. is reckless? Absolutely, it's reckless. Think about that. All of these get-togethers where people have been jammed together voluntarily because they want to protest and party and so forth. They have all been tied to super spreading events. Now, do you think that the protest in Washington was a super spreader event? I do. We'll probably find out about that, in the next couple of weeks. Next thing, inflation. So your government has given out money through inflation. If you go to eBay and you type in vintage battery charger, and you look at the prices of a used battery charger, for example, this would be a quality American-made product, vintage. We made them during that period. I'm talking about the 60s, 70s, 80s. We made those products. So what you're looking at would be an American-made battery charger. How much do they cost? Well, I remember buying one at Sears, a 10-amp battery charger marked Sears, not Craftsman, just Sears. It was $19.99. How much is it now on eBay? $100. $100. If you look at battery chargers, I used to be able to buy them for $20 and $30 on eBay. Now they're averaging, with shipping, about $100 used, rusted, banged up. 40 years old. 50 years old. Good quality American products. If you look at tools with names like SK Wayne or SK or Craftsman or Snap-on or Blackhawk, Proto, real good quality American tools, you will find the prices are extraordinary. Did you ever think you'd spend close to $100 for a 3/8-inch drive ratchet? Used? With shipping? Really? They were $10 when they were new. Right now, plumbing, heating, electrical, wood products are sky high. A few years ago, you could buy a 2x4 for $2. A few years before that, less than $1. Now $6. PVC, polyvinyl chloride, plumbing, dramatic jumps in price. CPVC, dramatic price increases. all kinds of wood products, I would not be able to build this house for less than 3 or 4x what it was 15 years ago. This is all brought to you by corruption, by the international synagogue of greed. I'm not kidding. We're being controlled, manipulated, monitored, surveilled, spied on, and every person in government is responsible for this. There is a homework assignment I have for you. And Rich, this is your fault. I was going to be quiet today, but you hit my button. Here's a homework assignment. It's a video, Judgment at Nuremberg. Spencer Tracy, Burt Lancaster, Richard Widmark, Marlena Dietrich, Judy Garland. 1961. If you watch this, you will see what I have been referring to as situational morality. Well, everybody was doing it, if they were doing it, so the whole country was doing it, so it's okay for judges to sentence people to death for crimes they didn't commit because all the other judges were doing it. It's not okay. Right is still right, wrong is still wrong. Situational morality is unacceptable. It's wrong. Scheben, thank you so much for being with us. We'll be back.